Chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Roskam, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, tomorrow marks the one-year anniversary of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the so-called Iran nuclear deal. And President Obama made a series of promises to the American people. One was that Iran would cease its illicit nuclear activity, and yet last week, Mr. Speaker, Germany reported that Iran has increased its illegal proliferation of nuclear technology. President Obama also promised that the nuclear deal would moderate Iran. In other words, there was a gentle, nice Iran that just was waiting to come out, if only we would be more understanding. But in the past year, the Islamic Republic has launched nuclear ballistic missiles in violation of UN security resolutions. They've kidnapped U.S. sailors. They've shot rockets within 1,500 yards of U.S. Navy ships, and they've increased their support for terror regimes and terror groups, and they remain the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism. The president also stated that the U.S. sanctions regime would stay in place against Iran's terror activity while it was being lifted against the nuclear activity, but instead the U.S. has become Iran's negotiator-in-chief on the world stage and has rewarded companies that continue to support the Iranian National Guard Corps and is devising ways to give Iran access to the U.S. financial system. 1 year after the president agreed to a dangerous nuclear deal, Iran continues to be a major adversary. So Congress needs to highlight and spotlight Iran's malevolent activity. And the good news is Congress is doing just that, Mr. Speaker. I'm encouraged that the House will take up 3 very important pieces of legislation today. It will deal with the heavy water bill. Now, think about this. Iran gets caught manufacturing heavy water, and rather than calling out the Iranian regime in clear violation of the nuclear deal, what does the administration do? The administration says, well, we're going to help Iran comply with the deal that they've just violated by using United States taxpayer money to buy the heavy water from Iran. I mean, you can't make this up. It is so absurd. We're only giving excuses, and we've got to focus in on what else is happening on this issue. Now, Boeing and Airbus have failed to understand the deep risks that come from doing business with Iran. These aren't necessarily risks for their bottom line because they're very willing to sell to a terrorist regime, but they're risks to freedom-loving people around the world because Airbus and Boeing want to do what? They want to sell a product that can be used for terrorism. They can use airlines for the purpose of moving things into illicit areas. We all know that Iran Air was sanctioned for ferrying weapons and troops to rogue regimes and to terrorist groups. We know that Iran Air was implicated in North Korea's ballistic missile tests. And we also know that Iran systemically uses their commercial aircraft to transport weapons, troops, missiles, cash, and other supplies to terror groups. Mr. Speaker, on my left is a display. This is a computer printout that shows a flight from Tehran to Damascus last week. Now think about this. This is the hubris of the Iranian regime, the Iranian Air Force, flying a Boeing 747 in the middle of the night over from Tehran to Damascus. Do we think that this is for commercial purposes? Of course not. Do we think that this is for, tourism? Of course not. Do we think that they're flying, baby formula or textbooks? Of course not. What they're doing is a bad act, and we ought not be complicit in this. Mr. Speaker, 1 week ago, this House passed on a bipartisan basis limitations to the financial services appropriations bill that would prevent this sale. And we did it by voice vote. And what a voice vote means is that nobody substantively rised in opposition. Why? Because there's no real reason to rise in opposition, because more and more people are recognizing that these types of sales should not go through. And in response, the CEO of Boeing, Dennis Muhlenberg, said this. He essentially said, well, look, us selling to Iran, it's a good business opportunity to the Iranians, and then he said to do business with the Iranians. And then he also said, well, if Boeing can't sell, then nobody else should be able to sell. But did you notice something, Mr. Speaker, in those two comments? He didn't say, look, we've got this under control. He didn't say, we're positive that nothing is going to be used for terrorism. He didn't say that this wouldn't jeopardize national security. He just said, if we can't do it, nobody should be able to do it. Well, look, I agree. If Boeing can't do it, nobody should be able to do it. And it's well known that all of Boeing's competitors, that is Airbus from France, Bombardier of Canada, Embraer from Brazil, Comac from China, each of these companies have sources of at least 10% of their components from the United States, and they require the same license that Boeing does, but that's not the point. What we need are companies, iconic American companies, following the lead of companies like Lockheed Martin, that has said they won't pursue this, Northrop Grumman, and others that haven't sullied their reputations. It's time for Congress to continue to do its good work, and I yield back.